Insecurities are thoughts stemming from anxiety, which stems from fear that we have little or no self-worth in this or that particular area. Not good looking enough, not smart enough, not talented enough, not disciplined enough. Whatever we're currently feeling insecure about is what leads to being self-conscious, having low self-esteem, low confidence, and we become driven by fear rather than fearlessness. All insecurities stem from the perception that there is a me made up of this body and this mind, which makes up the illusion of who we think we are. And that reminds me of something that was talked about a lot when I was living in a monastery in northern India. And it is the Buddhist concept of emptiness. And this concept is about how there is an illusion of reality. And we believe we're seeing reality as it truly is. But if we just dig a little deeper, if we just spend a little time actually inspecting this illusion, what we find is that what we are really seeing is our interpretation of reality, our projection of our beliefs, our identity, and our concept of reality over actual being, over actual truth of what really is taking place around us and within us. When we are constantly lost in thought, labeling and judging things, we are creating a filter between ourselves and the world. And so we get sucked into these dramas with our mental story playing against someone else's mental story. And the truth gets lost in the process. And it all stems from this fundamental misperception that everything exists independently and inherently on its own. Whereas we know with this closer inspection that everything only exists in an interdependent reality. And everything exists because of the cause and effects that came before it. There is no solidity, no permanence, and nothing objectively existing the way we believe them to be. For example, we think that who we are, the self, is made up of the mind and body. But the mind and the body are two separate things. There is only one self, though, which means that the true I, the sense of self that we all have, is either divided in two, and thus a plural entity, which goes against how we view the world, or it is the combination of both. But all we have to do is look at the ever-changing nature of the mind. Thoughts constantly arising and falling away. Experiences constantly arising within our consciousness and falling away. Emotions constantly changing. And then we look at the body and we see the same thing. We see cells constantly being born and other cells constantly dying. And we are in this constant state of death and rebirth. And there is no cell within our body that is still there 7 years later. We are physically an entirely new person. And yet the self remains the same, which says that The self is not found in the cells of our body, and it is not found in the mind either. And we start with this self-inspection because this is what we have the most access to. But once we really develop an understanding that there is no me that we sense, there is no independent, inherent self, that in fact there is this emptiness of all phenomenon in the universe that only exists as a artificial concept in the mind that is projected onto that thing. And so the act of witnessing an object is the act of projecting a concept of that object onto it. And once we recognize that emptiness within ourselves, we can see it all around us. We can see that a table is not a table. A table is a concept we put on an object because of its form and function. Yet, if you look closely, there is no table. If you were to take sandpaper and sand down a table until it's one little stub, you couldn't point to one moment where it loses its essence of table because it only existed in a interdependent relationship between the witness and the object. And once we move beyond this subject-object reality, we stop being separate from the universe and we start becoming one with the universe. So once we develop a deep sense of the truth about our existence, that we are the creators and witness simultaneously, we begin to understand that nothing is actually as it seems, that any story about any situation, any object, any self-identity is merely part of that projection and not to be taken as absolute fact. And we stop getting sucked into the drama. We stop getting caught up with labels and identities and inconveniences and all of the things that make us suffer, whether it is mental turmoil or unpleasurable circumstances we find ourselves in. And we simply recognize them as the interdependent, constantly changing cause and effect playing out before our eyes. And that all the meaning, all of the clinging on and attachment to certain situations, possessions, or even ego and identity dissolve once we simply recognize that they don't exist inherently on their own, permanent as we perceive them. And we can practice this in our daily life simply by reminding ourselves that whatever is consuming our thoughts is merely a fabrication, a fictional story we are telling ourselves. And we don't have to believe in it, we don't have to invest in it, and we can simply allow everything to come and go as the universe intended, in its infinite perfection and infinite wisdom. And there is nothing that can happen that can shake us from our deep-rooted centeredness and peace.